Hey everyone, my name is Miss Mainring and I teach 4th grade ELA at Cypress Point University Elementary. Today we are going to be digging into lesson 17 of the Whipping Boy. So hopefully in front of you, everyone has a copy of the Whipping Boy. If you may have picked this up from your school or you have it on your computer. If not, that's okay, you can follow along with me. But everyone definitely needs a pencil and a piece of paper in front of you. If you need to go grab that, you can pause this video or run really quick before I start talking again. So the last time I saw you, we learned how to analyze characters in the first 3 chapters of The Whipping Boy. So we looked at Prince Brat's thoughts, words, and actions to see what kind of character he was, and we wrote a paragraph about that. Today, we are going to read chapter 4 of The Whipping Boy, and we are going to determine how the author's word choice promotes imagery. Now, you may be saying, Miss Mainring, what is imagery? I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, imagery is the author's use of language that appeals to the 5 senses to help the reader paint a picture in their mind. So if you've ever read a book and you can kind of picture that or imagine it in your mind, that's because the author is using imagery. So the author will use words to describe how something smells, how it looks or the sight of it, how something sounds, the taste of something, or how it feels when you touch something. So the author can use words like stinky, sweet, musty, or clean to describe how something smells. We know that if something's sweet, that makes us think, that's great. But if something's musty or stinky, we may say, ew, get away. Then we have our sight. So the author may use words like shiny, bright, dull, or colorful, just a few examples. Then how something sounds. So it can be rumbling, booming, sizzling, or it's quiet. Then we can also describe how something tastes. If it's spicy, sour, gross, or salty, are just a few examples. And then lastly, we have how something feels when we touch it. So it could be soft, damp, smooth, or bumpy. I know one of my 4th graders just got a new puppy, and he said how soft the puppy is. So that is how it feels when you touch it. So I want you to listen as I read chapter 4 of The Whipping Boy. And as I read, I want you to listen for words or phrases that promote imagery and create a mood for the setting. So look for those words where the author describes things to our 5 senses. So we are in chapter 4, containing hands in the fog. The night moon had lit their way like a lantern, but by dawn the runaways, double mounted on the horse from the castle stable, were hopelessly lost. A thick fog had swirled in. They'd strayed from the road, and the trees had closed in on them. "Forest is creepy things," said Jimmy, hanging on to the basket as best he could. "Give me cobbled streets any time." A low branch almost swept them off the saddle. "Boy," said the prince, "get down and lead this dumb-headed beast." "Lead it in this fog? I need 2 hands and a lantern to find me own nose." So I'm going to stop right here and ask you, why did Prince Brat tell Jimmy to get down? Why did Prince Brat tell Jimmy to get down? That's exactly right. Prince Brat told Jimmy to get down and lead the horse through the fog because they couldn't see anything. But Jimmy slipped off the saddle. A plan had been tumbling about in his head. "Here's your chance, Jimmy," he told himself. Slip away in the fog. Run for it. No more whippings for you. Not if you can't be found. The great sewers, Jimmy. That's the place to hide. What's keeping you? Asked the prince. Grab the halter. I'm thinking. Leaves crackled under Jimmy's feet as he began to back off. His mind was made up. Once the fog cleared, he'd find the river. Hadn't his paw taught him his way through the maze of mighty brick sewers? That's where they'd caught the fiercest rats to sell by the cageful. The dog and rat pits paid fancy prices for the best fighters, and that meant sewer rats. Who'd think to look for Jimmy under the city? So can anyone tell me, what is Jimmy planning here? What is he thinking in his mind? Jimmy is thinking that he is going to run away from Prince Brat. He's going to leave Prince Brat alone in the woods to fend for himself, and Jimmy's going to go back to the streets that he loves and misses so much. Jimmy took another crackling step backward and froze. A sudden yellow glow floated in the fog. The prince burst into squawks and bellows. Who's there? Let go! Take your hands off me, you insolent rascal! There came a rough, booming reply. Well, what we got here? The glowing lantern swayed. A noisy brat on a fine beast of a horse. Jimmy edged closer. A cutthroat, he thought. A cutthroat is a criminal in the Middle Ages. Like a snake striking, a ghostly hand darted through the fog and clutched his arm. A second cutthroat. Jimmy looked up and barely made out a long, bony face with hollow cheeks and a nose like a meat cleaver. I got another, Hilly, cackled the second man, shoving Jimmy forward. And that is the end of chapter 4. So, at the end of our chapter, Jimmy and Prince Brat were caught by 2 criminals. Let's look back in our chapter and think about that imagery that we talked about just a few minutes ago. So this question is, what words or phrases did the author use to promote imagery in this excerpt from the text? So the first thing we need to do is go back and read that text. The night moon had lit their way like a lantern, but by dawn the runaways, double mounted on a horse from the castle stable, were hopelessly lost. A thick fog had swirled in. They'd strayed from the road, and trees had closed in on them. So we need to look at what words help describe how something looks, sounds, feels, tastes. We see a lot of words to describe the sight here. So the first thing I see is the moon lit their way like a lantern. So the author is helping us see what kind of light it is. We know it's dark outside, and the only light they have is the moon. Next, I see that they're riding together. They're double mounted. So both boys are riding together. I can picture that in my mind, them sharing a horse. Then I see that there was a thick fog. That word thick describes what the fog looks like. Have any of you ever gone outside, maybe early in the morning, and there's fog all around your house where you can barely see in front of you? That's what the forest looks like for Jimmy and Prince Brat. When the author uses that word thick, it helps me imagine not being able to see in front of you. Then, what words do you see to describe how the fog came in? The author used the words swirled in. Now, he could have said the fog came in, or there was fog. But instead, he said the thick fog had swirled in. When I see those words swirled in, I can imagine the fog coming in, almost wrapping around Jimmy and Prince Brad, kind of like it's closing in on them. And then lastly, the author uses imagery words to describe what the trees look like. When the author said the trees closed in on them, those words closed in help me think that there's tons of trees around them, and they're almost having like a cage around Jimmy and Prince Brad. Our next question is, what mood did these words help set? And why might the author use these words to describe these events? So again, what mood did these words help set? And why might the author use these words to describe these events? So a mood is a feeling that the text has. Just like you and I have different moods, a text or a story can have different moods as well. So whenever I see the author say, had lit their way like a lantern, it's dark but only one light around, I know whenever I'm outside at night, that's kind of scary. So that makes me think, that's a little scary to be out in the woods at night. Then the author says that there was a thick fog and it was swirling or wrapping around Jimmy and Prince Brad. So there's fog everywhere they can't see in front of them. And then again, when the author says the trees closed in on them, that helps me imagine there's tons of trees all around the two boys. Now, all of those imagery words together kind of make me feel like the author was trying to set a creepy mood or maybe a spooky mood in this part of the text. Now, why do you think the author would do that? Why would the author make us feel scared when we were reading this? I think it's because the author knew that two criminals were about to come and find Jimmy and Prince Brad, and he wanted to set us up for those two criminals being scary. So now that we've seen how authors add imagery words to describe the setting of the story and to set a mood in the story, it's your turn. So our directions are to expand the kernel sentence. Now remember, we do these sentence expansions to practice adding details to our story or to our writing. So whenever we add details here, I want you to remember that spooky mood that the author has already set up and see what details can we add to match that spooky mood. So our kernel sentence, Jimmy and Prince Brad met them. Who did Jimmy and Prince Brad meet? Jimmy and Prince Brad met two criminals. Now you might even say two cutthroats because that's what they're called in the text. But I'm going to say two criminals. When did Jimmy and Prince Brad meet the two criminals? They met them at night. Now this symbol right here stands for at. Again, these are dotted lines, so we're not going to write full sentences, and I can use those note-taking strategies and abbreviations. And then lastly, we have where. Where did Jimmy and Prince Brad meet them? They met them in the dark woods. So we have answered our questions. Now it's time to expand this sentence and put it all together. So the first thing we are going to start out with is our when. We always start our sentence with when. So I'm going to start out at night. So we have included our when. Now let's go back to our kernel. Jimmy and Prince Brad met. Now, in our current sentence, it says them, but I know we can replace them with the two criminals. So they met two criminals. Now we still have our where, so I'm going to add in the dark woods. And don't forget your period at the end of your sentence. Now before we finish, we want to read this one more time to make sure we didn't leave out any words and we have correct capitalization and punctuation. So let's read it together. At night, Jimmy and Prince Brat met two criminals in the dark woods. So we described who those men were, when they met the men, and where they met the men. And I think when we add those details, it definitely makes it seem a little scarier than this sentence, just like our chapter today did. So this is the end of our lesson. Today you learned that authors use words and phrases to promote imagery and set the mood. And you also practice expanding sentences to add details. Thank y'all so much for watching, and know that all of us miss you so much. Bye guys.